Right, I'll get started then, because I've only got like an hour, and we'll see what I can get through. I'm going to take you on a journey through MathsBot then. So this was the blurb for the session. You might have heard of MathsBot. Some people though, and like when I look at the analytics of who actually uses what pages and stuff, there's like thousands of pages which are just not even touched in MathsBot, and I want to try and correct that a little bit, because I think there's some really good stuff that people don't even know about. I think it's something to do with the way that Google kind of sorts its search results or something. Some resources are really popular, some resources just not touched at all. So I'm going to give you a range of all the ones which are there. So I'm going to start off with the question generators, because that's how MathsBot began. It began simply as a tool for me to generate questions, because that's all I knew how to do. So it looks like the question generators. Here's the home page. And if you click on the question generators, it'll look like this. And this resource in the top left, this differentiated questions, was where it all started. Many years ago, almost 11, it began with just these differentiated questions. You pick your topic, something, let's say some sort of fractions topics, fractional increase and decrease, and you get these 3 columns of questions, which is great, and I still use it. It's still one of the most popular pages on the site. It's good, it's highly customizable. You've got these difficulty levels in the top corner. They're not linked to any kind of grades or anything like that. It's just basically, I think 0 is the simplest version of the question. If I set it both to 0, 0, you can see. And then I think once you get to level 10, that's basically about as hard as you'd ever really want to do without the aid of a calculator or a computer. Like I say, do ask me any questions if you want. There's some things that people don't know about this. Obviously, you can change the number of questions. That's quite straightforward. The default is 5, because I think that's about enough. But if you click on the little number tab as well, you can refresh any particular questions that you don't want. And not everybody knows that. And if you click on the question itself, it toggles between the answer as well. One other thing, if you I'm not sure if that pops up, but there's a little click to toggle answer as well, and a shift click to launch the camera tool. Now, if you've got a visualizer attached and you shift click, it will load up a visualizer. I haven't got my visualizer connected at the moment, but basically it's an overlay of the camera with the question there as well. So that's something else that might be useful as well. So there's loads of topics on here. Don't know how many exactly, to be honest, but well into the hundreds of topics. And you just search for your keyboard, search for your keyword like that. And that was how MathsBot all started. And then, how do teachers use these question generators? I mean, I would show them a concept, model them a concept, and then okay, we need some practice on addition, say for example, and you just literally choose how many questions you want, choose your difficulty, just press create questions, and there's some addition questions. It's as straightforward as that. It's basically getting them to the point of where they can, for some independent practice. Before all that, though, is where all the manipulatives and stuff kick in, which I'll get to kind of later. So all the links for these, by the way, are in the PowerPoint. I've got all the links there. There's the generator menu just down there. I'm just going to hide that thing as well. Okay, with the generators then I got this idea of, okay, I read a Mr. Barton book actually, in this idea of my turn, your turn. So the example problem pairs, the next one along, that's kind of like a split screen thing. So if I still use the addition question that we just used, that kind of split screens your whiteboard. You can full screen it as well just by pressing that button to get rid of any distractions here. Again, you can press new questions, you can replace individual questions. Increase the difficulty as they start getting more proficient at it, starting introducing decimals and things like that eventually, by the time we get up to the higher levels. You can toggle the question on and off down at the bottom if you just want to focus on one particular one. And again, you've got that launch camera tool, which loads your visualizer. And then you've got these colorful icons down at the bottom, which people have not tend to cotton on what these are for yet. But so if I just go down the difficulty a little bit, let's go something like 31 plus 70, you'll see that there's various manipulatives linked to this. You've got bar models, you've got Cuisenaire rods, Dean's blocks, and you've got place value counters as well. So you might want to fire up the place value counters, and when you do, you'll see you've got that same question there, 31 plus 70, which is the same one as the example problem pair. So you can then model what 31 plus 70 might look like, however you want to do it. Just make your 70 and your 31 or whatever, then model adding them together. You group those up, you've got your 100 and 101 as your answer. However you want to do it, you can use place value counters, or you could do the whole thing with Dean's blocks maybe, or you might be more of a bar model fan. You'll just see it's the same question loading up each time. So that took me a while to do, because basically every single one of these kind of topics, I had to go down each one and say, okay, which manipulative might be useful for that particular tool. So now I've done it. It was like a one-off job, but now I have done it. Yeah, it's there forever. So it was a painful couple of weeks as I was going through all that, but I think it was worth it in the long run. So there's the example problem pairs, and that probably comes before the differentiation question ones. It's alphabetical in the question generators, but you probably just start with the example pairs, then go on to your differentiated questions. So imagine, here's where mine's already blown. That's nice. Keep any questions, just do pop them in. I'll keep an eye on the chat. So imagine you're on this addition question and you've worked your way up to a difficulty that you want. So you're happy with this level of difficulty. Kids are getting the your turn right, and so on. Then you just press this practice button, and that directly links to the differentiated questions that I've shown you with the same difficulty level that you just achieved on the example problem pair. And at any point, you can do that shift click to load the visualizer or nip back. There's actually a button here to nip back to example problem pair as well. So the two just toggle between the two constantly, pretty much. So that's a nice little nifty feature, just to try and make MathsBot a little bit more sort of coherent, rather than just loads of separate resources all bundled together. I kind of want them all working simultaneously, and kind of the sum of their parts being greater than the whole kind of thing. I think that's the right way around. Okay, what else is there on the question generators? There's if you want to be more specific, there's this one. I'm not going to spend much time on this one at all. Well, this you can choose separate topics for each one. So you might want addition, you might want to do subtraction. Let's do the four observations, because why not? I've started now. Then division, drop it down from there, and then just press create your questions. 5 questions of each, and you've got 5 additions, 5 subtractions, 5 multiplications, 5 divisions. Obviously that level was 0 to 10. Not many people would want that. Normally something like 0 to 4 might be more appropriate. Or basically a gap of around about 4 or 5 in the difficulty makes it a bit more appropriate. But that's the idea, that you can make up questions of well, 4 different columns of questions if you want. But the big one, and this is what I on about, like people not using much on MathsBot, is this test maker. And it's literally one of my most used resources personally. I use it like most lessons, and it loads up like this. And these are, again, all the questions in those generators that I've shown you. And you can just pick and choose. So say I've been doing some equations work with my class, to start typing equations, and you can start filtering all the equations work that you might want. But then you might also want to do a bit of retrieval with, say you've done some ratio work. So you type in ratio, and you might want to chuck in a few ratio questions as well. And then you might want to go back to the basics and just do some work on the 4 operations. So you see how it works. You basically just pick and choose your topics you want using this filtering thing here. And when you've got enough topics chosen, so I'll just choose a few more just for effect. So I've got like 12 topics chosen there. It keeps track of how many topics you've got at the top here. Then you just press create your test. Again, mess with the difficulty. I've defaulted from 2 to 5, but you can have whatever you want. Just press your create test, and then you've got 12 questions, and those 12 questions are on what you've just chosen. If you want more questions, you can have literally as many as you want. I've not tested what it goes up to, but it'll go up to something ridiculous. You can have like as many questions as you want. So if you want to generate a huge end of term test or something, you could maybe do that as well. If it's too small for you, or if you don't want to print this out, there is a print button there to print it. But quite often what I'll do is, for like starters or something, I'll maybe just choose 8 questions, create my test, and I might say, oh, it's my recall starter or something. Then I'll just increase the font size here and decrease the spacing of the question. So then it's kind of nice to just display on a board rather than having to do any printing. So it's multifaceted kind of, this tool. It's useful for printed tests, but it's also really useful for little starters as well. And just press the show answers, you get a little answer key down there at the bottom as well. If that header thing there is annoying, just go back to the menu. You can turn your headers off, and then you can just create it without the headers as well. That's what you're looking at now is probably my most used feature of the resource. I teach secondary. I know there's a lot of primary on the call as well, but like with secondary, I've been doing things like simultaneous equation, quadratic equations. I just make sure I chuck some of these in my starters to the lessons, just so they're not forgetting them. I just find it's really good for retrieval and making sure they can still remember the stuff that I've taught them weeks, months, potentially years ago. Do I display the question on the board for the whole class? Yes, they can. That's what I use it quite often, like little 5-minute, 10-minute starter, crack on with those. Or if I want a more sort of meaty, like here's an actual test I want you to do, then I might say choose 30 questions, seems reasonable, on whatever topics I want, maybe add a few more topics in, maybe take a few topics out, press me create test, shrink the font down right to about 18 or something, and then I'll send that to the printer. I'll just press print. Now, when you do press print, I've just realized I chose 30 questions and they're in 4 columns. Should mention that. You can choose the number of columns you want. So if you only want 3 columns, and 3 obviously goes into 30, so that will look nicer when you print it now because it's columns of 3. This is just the preview print. Quite often you have to press more settings on a print and change the scale to something more realistic, and then you can fit the whole thing on one page if you want. Normally it's defaulted to 100, which is kind of large, but just mess with this scale thing down here, and eventually you'll either fit it onto 2 pages or one side. I mean, that won't be too bad, and I'll just send that to the printer like that. And there's my test created on whatever topics you've been covering over the half term or over the full term or whatever. Okay, right. Hopefully that answers your question, Miss Vinton. If it doesn't, just keep firing them up. Is there another question? Oh, question: do questions allow for progression, e.g., addition within 10 before addition bridging 10? Not at the moment, because when I first made this, it was just literally arithmetic addition. So if I go like 0 to 10, you can see the progression at the moment. If I choose sort of 10 questions, looks like that. That's the progression. But my Thursday, Friday job is to fine tune this and literally have, yes, addition bonds within 20, bridging 10 and all that sort of stuff. So to really granulate these options. So instead of just addition, it is like what you say, addition within 10, addition, bridging 10, and so on. It's a long-term project, MathsBot. I've resigned myself to the fact that it's a lifetime of work. It's just whatever I can get done in the next sort of, hopefully quite a few more years to go yet. Print to PDF and then share to show we would create. Did you? Right, yeah, you can print to PDF as well, obviously, of course. Right, so that's the generators, and I've spent about 15 minutes, and I said I'd give myself about 15 minutes for that. So there we go. Those are the big ones. The differentiated questions is the most used page on the site still. The example problem pairs is barely touched, and the test maker, it's like it doesn't even exist. So I'd like people to start using that and sharing it, and because it really is like, I made MathsBot, and that's the page I use more than anything else. So I reckon it's got to be pretty decent. But yeah, so have a go and let me know what you think. And feedback, as always, just either, normally you can find me on Twitter or just Johnathan at MathsBot if you want an email as well. Okay, the manipulatives then. This is the most exciting bit, I think, of the site. There's a little screenshot of some of the manipulatives. If you just click on that link there, you'll fire up the whole lot. So it's just on the manipulatives tab here on MathsBot. There's quite a few of them. I'm not sure how many, but some of them are a bit more niche, but some of them are just useful for so many topics. So things like algebra tiles. I was going to do something on algebra tiles, but I realized that there's loads of secondaries, but there's so I'm not going to bother. But I just wanted to show you how all of these work. All of them, when you load them, they kind of have like copy buttons in the top left, and all the big ones, so like algebra tiles, or maybe more primary would be the Dean's block, which is like their baby brother Dean's blocks. We go from Dean's blocks to algebra tile as we go to secondary. You can see if I put them kind of side by side, actually, if I go Dean's blocks and tiles, you can see the similarities between them. I just chuck that to the left and the right like that. They're the same colors. You've got your 100 square with Dean's blocks, and you have your X squared with an algebra tile. You have your 10 tile and you have your X tile. So one of my sort of big passions is a coherent curriculum, where kids see a load of Dean's blocks in primary, they understand place value in base 10, and then when they start going up to secondary and looking at algebra and base X arithmetic, the whole thing just makes sense because they're so related. And I do a whole session just showing the relationships between Dean's blocks and algebra tiles. I think that for coherence, it's important that I keep the colours the same and I show the links between the two. So on all these manipulatives, so I'll go stick with the Dean's blocks for a second. You got these copy buttons. Now, I get at least one email a month saying I've run out of 10s because people are doing that. And then before too long, I'm not sure exactly how many 10s I put on here, but eventually you run out of them. Yes, I think there's about 10 of them there. And then I get an email saying, why is there only 10 10s? Can you create more? So obviously I've not overlooked that. You can use these copy buttons here to copy them. Or if you're on a keyboard, you can just literally hold down the right arrow button and have as many 10s as you want. But I still get emails to this day about that. But maybe, I mean, it must be a user experience thing. I need to maybe make it clearer or something like that. So that's how I use them. The generators that I've already shown you, as part of that massive sort of thing where I went through each one, linking manipulative to topic and stuff, these are all the questions from the generators, which I think can be modeled with Dean's blocks, if that makes sense. So out of those like list of 200 questions or something, I reckon these 16 are probably decent for Dean's blocks. So things like place value, powers. You can change the base on these Dean's blocks as well. So like because powers is not something you don't normally do with base 10 Dean's blocks, but you can change this base here. And you can change it instead of a 10 by 10 square. If you want to change it to a 3 by 3 square, you're more than welcome to. So if you ever want to make like your square numbers real fast, like you go down all the way to base 1, and then I just press right arrow button to copy, increase my base, and then like in seconds you can create all the square numbers, which is quite handy. And then if you want to do the similar thing with the cube as well, just reduce the base down to 1, and then you can make all your cube numbers really fast as well. Not quite as good as the physical ones maybe, but like the physical ones, you don't normally get all the different bases of cubes. So it's just a real quick way of making, to explore square numbers and cube numbers as well. So something that you wouldn't normally be able to do with the physical ones, that's where the digital ones have their kind of advantage. There's also this tiny button here. That's a massive advantage over the physical ones as well. You can't do that with the physical ones. You have to manage to be a classroom. But that being said, there are pros and cons of each. And I keep saying it's on my to-do list. I want to write a session like and highlight where digital ones are better than physical ones and vice versa as well. So there's the Dean's blocks, which are useful. You can also, because quite often Dean's blocks are used for arithmetic, you can put a little table on here. Choose how many columns you want in the table. If you're just doing very simple addition, you just might want 10s and 1s, or you might want to go up to 100s. You can change what it says in each heading as well, because I know some of us might be still in the old school of units, for example, rather than 10s, 100s and 1s. You might want to change it to units. Or if you want to look at decimals as well, there's nothing to say like call that 0.01, call that 0.1, and call this one your unit here as well. See, the column headings are fully customizable. You might want to call that 1, which in that case, that'll be 0.1. And in that case, that'll be 0.01. So you can do decimal work as well with them. So they're fully customizable if you have a play with all the options as well. You can change the colors, whether they're 3D as well, toggle that option off as well. There's plenty of stuff you can do with them. Hopefully most of the buttons are self-explanatory, but yeah, the main thing for me is, yeah, make sure you're aware of these copy buttons, and make sure you're aware that they're hooked up to all the questions in the generators. Again, with the difficulty selection, you can change your difficulty as well. It's all there. So that's the Dean's blocks. Like I say, any questions, just pop them in the chat. I'm going to show you the Cuisenaire rods as well, because I think these are cool. I've added a few extra features to these recently. Again, you've got the copy buttons, the top corner. You can now square the Cuisenaire rod. So if you take the 2 rod, it doesn't have to be a 2, by the way. You can call it, give it whatever value you want. You can label it whatever. Literally, you can type whatever you want in there. or you can assign the white rod whatever value you want. So you might want the white rod all of a sudden to be 5, and that changes the value of all the other rods accordingly, which is quite a powerful thing, because sometimes you might want the white to be 100 or something, and then or you might want the white to be saying 0.1, and then the orange rod all of a sudden becomes the 1. Or if you say the white is 0.2, then the yellow rod becomes the 1, and you can ask all sorts of questions based on what the value of the whole is. I hope to at some point add fractions onto this as well, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get them to fit nicely in the rod. So the rods as well, if I just hide the values for a second, you can have the letters on as well. You can square them by pressing the square button, which is kind of nice. You can take the whole lot and just square the whole lot at once. You can drag select as well, square and so on. And again, the Q's and air rods I find are really versatile. You've got a lot more questions pulled from the generator, I think, that you can use with them. So if I just choose like a ratio question, maybe, so find a share given another. Let's tidy those up a sec. So let's have a slightly harder one than that. So amount was shared in the ratio 3:5, and the smallest share was 12. Here's how I'd model it in the classroom. I'd chuck my values on the rod. I'd put the white one rod back as 1 for this. And I'd say, okay, the ratio is 3:5, like so. And I say, okay, the smallest share was 12. So this 3 here, I need to scale that up to be 12. Now, if you think about what you might do on the abstract here, you'd probably have 3 and 5, then a little arrows going down with a little times by 4 or something. So what you do, you just select them and just press the copy button, and you get the kids to count what the size of the smallest share is. So at the moment it's 3:5. If you make a copy of that, now it's 6:10. And then you do it again, it's now 9:15. And then do it once more, you get the smallest share being 12 to 20. So the largest share must have been 20 because the smallest share is now 12. So it's a nice visual way, I think, of looking at ratio questions. And most of the ratio stuff is on there. Q's and air rod's great for ratio. Things like that. That's literally exactly how I did it with my year 7 class a couple of months back. And then we went into the differentiate questions. Well, I showed them this first because I think this is the model in the expositions phase of things. Then I went into the my turn, your turn, and then I went into the differentiated questions, and then kept checking it lesson by lesson with the test maker. One more bar model that I'll show you then. So after you've used Q's and air rods, sticking with the ratio theme, why not? There's a bar modeling tool here as well, which is a bit more sort of sophisticated to use, takes a bit more practice to use. So if I want to do a similar question, so I'll share a ratio again, share given total. So share 16 in the ratio 3:1. Change the size of the boxes, change the height of the boxes if you want, to whatever you want. So it's 3:1. The way I do it is I say, okay, that's 3 parts to 1 part, just using the arrow buttons to copy that. Then I'll add a brace and rotate it round. And I'll say, if I just change the height of that, I'll say that's say 16. And then can we work out the value of each of these? So we hopefully that this image here gives the idea that you need to do 16 divided by 4. So in each one, we can just stick the number 4. Not everyone's a fan of stacking them on top of each other. I know a lot of teachers that prefer to put them side by side like that. What they might want to do is maybe shade this bar in one color and shade these 3 in another color. So this is an alternative method that you might prefer, doing it something like that. Just rotate that brace around again. And I think, to be honest, for this particular question, that kind of makes more sense. I prefer the stacking feature more when you're comparing ratios, like when you've got a difference or something like that. But I hope it's the same thing, same sort of idea. Have a play with it. Copy buttons are there as usual. You can also, if I had a bar here, if you don't want to do copies of, I naturally shrunk it down, then made copies of the bar like that. But what some people prefer to do is keep the bar at length, and then you can add the parts like this. Just keep adding parts to your bar, and then say how many have we got there? 1, 2, 3, I've got 9 so far. There's 10. You can maybe use it for percentages or something. Let's fill 70% of that bar, or 60%, 50%, and so on. And yeah, because each of those would be 10%. You can just type, by the way, and those numbers will just appear in the bar. So there's yeah, you can use your imagination what you might want to use for that, like fraction walls, percentages walls, all sorts of stuff. It's kind of useful. It's not quite as simple to use as the Cuisenaire or the Dean's Box maybe. I tend to use this more for setting up lessons or preparing lessons. So I might like set up, get rid of this because that's not really relevant. This question here, I might set up and then sort of Windows Shift S. If you don't know that keyboard shortcut, it's like the best thing for a teacher. Windows Shift S, then you can just take a snip of it, and then it's down there in your clipboard, and then I just paste it into my PowerPoint or into whatever I'm using. I know some people use OneNote or whatever, and that's how I kind of pre-prepare my little examples if I need to. So yeah, there's the manipulative. I don't know if you've got any questions so far. If they are, just stick them in the chat. You've still got one now. Proof that manipulatives are not for the bottom end of school. Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, I use them throughout my teaching. I'm a secondary, like I say. I've currently got top set or close to top set, should I say, year 10. And I was doing the unit circle to trigonometry, and I was using my geoboard manipulative here. Now there's the geoboard when it loads up, just a rectilinear grid. You can have isometric as well if you want, but I was using it particularly for my year 10s with to do a unit circle. So I was exploring sine and cosine with mine, and was drawing sort of like triangles and seeing how the opposite and the adjacent. Some of you might remember SOHCAHTOA. I still don't mind that. I still don't mind that, to be honest. But yeah, there's loads of stuff you can do with the geoboard. I should probably, I mean, I could probably talk about this for another 5 minutes, but I won't. But it's kind of self-explanatory, this one. You can make rectangles, you can make triangles, you can fill them, you can make circles. It's kind of cool. Like if I wanted to do a really simple task, say I'm introducing the idea of squareness to a class, I might just do something like that, maybe do a non-example, maybe do that tricky case, because obviously this can't possibly be a square if it's on a slant, and do something like that. And I'll just ask the class, okay, which of these are squares, maybe something like that. You've got some nice squares there, you've got some non-squares. It's just a useful tool for anything geometric based geometry. Same thing, you could do a similar thing for triangles as well, couldn't you? Like how many kids think this is a triangle? Just because it kind of looks triangle shaped. So you could do some non-examples with triangles, or maybe this can't possibly be a triangle because, oh, sorry, undo that one, do that again. This one here is a classic. So how could that be a triangle? Yeah, well, and then you can explain about the definitions of what a triangle is. Have I got double-sided counters? Yes, I do. By the way, if you're ever not sure if I've got something, I've recently updated this search box at the top, and you can access any resource at all from any page of MathsBot. So if you just type, you won't actually get anything for double-sided counters, you'll notice, because all counters are double-sided. You will get a result for two color counters, in that like one side's a different color to another one, but loads of people call them double color counters, and myself as well, until it was someone like sarcastically, like I just did, pointed out that all counters are double-sided, and what you actually mean is a counter with two different colors on. So now they're called two color counters, but yeah, they are. So if you're ever doing any work with negative numbers, say for example, you might want to call that 1 and -1. So this calculation here is 6 plus -4, and then you can select them all. And zero pairs are a big thing nowadays, that idea that 1 and -1 cancels out. You can drop them on top of each other like that, or you can just select the whole lot and just press this zero pair button and you get your answer. Again, all these are linked to the generators. So addition with negatives, calculate -5 plus 3. There's your -5, there's your 3. And then just zero pair off your answer, and you can see your solution is -2 there. So two color counters are there as well, or double-sided counters. Sorry if I offended you with that sarcasm there. I apologize. Yeah, so that's a big part of the site, the manipulatives, and I spent a lot of time recently on linking everything to the question generators that I could. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically, I hope I've given you the general idea that, yeah, you click on one, you've got the copy questions, it's linked to the generator, and most of the other buttons. You can't break MathsBot, touch wood. So just have a play with the buttons and see what you can do with it. One of my favorite parts of the site are what I call the completion tables, and there's no way I could do a session on MathsBot without mentioning them. Now, it is quite a lot of secondary stuff on here, but there's plenty for primary as well. So I'll load up an example of, I mean, we've kind of stuck with a sharing and a ratio theme, that just kind of happened. If I load up this is what it looks like, a completion table. Looks quite daunting to begin with. What I tend to do is just go down to one row to begin with and explain what's going on. So if Anne and Bob are sharing money in a ratio 1:4 and Anne gets 5, then Bob would get 4 of those 5, so 20. So we can work out the difference and work out the total. And then we can mix it up a little bit, and I press a new value. Okay, what if the total is 102 or something, or 35? And then can we work backwards, work out what Anne would get and what Bob would get, and a difference. So play with the table a little bit. It's a useful little teaching tool. I'm just zooming in a little bit. Then maybe increase the rows like that. And the idea is that you can make really quite complex questions depending on which cells you reveal and which cells you don't. So we've got these ratios here. You might tell what the total is. The total is 36. So in this case, it's 36 divided by 9 you have to do. You might say what Bob gets. You might what Anne gets, or what Bob gets, or what the difference is. If you don't like the context, by the way, you can just toggle off that thing, get rid of any of the context. But I quite like the context for ratio questions, and I'm sure you do certainly down at primary. So that's quite a challenge. If you want to put the bar model on as well, you can do. See what it looks like. If you don't want it, by the way, any of these you can just check off, so you can get rid of the bar model entirely off that. So you just make a question like that. One thing that I've started adding to all these features, though, is this idea of bringing in the power of variation to these. So if I go to edit row and I change the ratio, say, to 2:5, and then I do the same on all of them, I can edit these completion tables. So edit row 3, change that to 2:5, and then row 4 to 2:5. You can see all the ratios are now 2:5. And with a little bit of mathematical thinking now, I can make a real nice worksheet really simply. So I might say that, okay, I want Anne, for this one, I want Anne to get £210. So I'll put a scalar of 105, because 105 times 2 gives me 210. Sorry, I wanted that to be on row 1 there. Change that again, 105. So Anne now gets 210 there, and hide all the others. And then I might want to set up another question where Bob gets 210. And he gets the 5 parts. So this time I'd have to do 210 divided by 5, which is 42. So I put the scalar as 42. I've got to go down to edit row 2 there. So change that to 42. And then I might want to say, okay, the total between them is 210 as well. So go down to row 3 now and put that one on. And then that's going to be 210 divided by 7. So change the scalar to 30. And then finally, the difference here, well, the difference is 3. So 210 divided by 3 is going to give me, divided by 70, give me 30 for that one. Sorry, do I just put 70 for that one? There we go. So then you've set up. It probably took me about 2 minutes to do that. That's a real nice task for variation when you're sharing in a ratio, because Anne gets 210. Bob, the 210 is what you're keeping the same, and the ratio is what you're keeping the same. The element of variation you're doing here is which person gets what. So Anne gets 210, Bob gets 210. And if they can work out all those answers from that, then you can be pretty confident that your kids are doing pretty well on ratio. And also, I suppose you could ask the question, how on earth did 210 come about from as well? Well, I thought of 210 in my head because I knew that 210 would have to divide by 2. It would have to divide by 5. It'd have to divide by 7, and it'd have to divide by the difference between the parts, which would be 3. So basically, it's the lowest common multiple of 2, 3, 5, and 7. So there's loads of mathematical you can think of thinking you can come on. Like if kids could make their own version of that and say, okay, I want integer answers for all of that. I've made a few of these as templates already pre-made as well, which I'll share at the end as well. But that's the idea behind a completion table. It's just loads of practice, loads and loads of practice in like a tiny space. I mean, that's going to keep them busy for a while. And then you can do things like, okay, let's hide the ratio and give them the difference in the total. And then all of a sudden, that bottom one there, you're not solving that unless you know how to solve simultaneous equations. So you've gone from simple, say, sharing in a ratio all the way to quite sophisticated simultaneous equations. And that's what's one of the beautiful things about these kind of completion tables, I think. Inequalities is one I recently made as well. So there's loads of these. I'm quite obsessed with these, you'll probably tell. Here's another one. So I'll get rid of the original inequality. Something like this I use all the time. And again, you can do that idea of variation. You can make the inequalities all the same. So edit row. So keep these all between -4 and 3. So change that to +3. So I'm just going to change all these so that it says to begin with -4 and -3. And I use this with it was a year 8 group, I believe, not long at all ago. And I literally didn't have to do any teaching. I put them all as that. Then I went back and changed. So put all these on. Obviously, they're all the same at the moment. And then I just changed this one to a greater than or equal to. Then I changed the third row to a greater than or equal to. And then I changed the fourth row to both of them. And I just had that image on the board. And I just said, what do you notice and what do you wonder? I actually Windows Shift S'd it, and I snipped that screen, and I posted it into PowerPoint with the what do you notice and what do you wonder. And kids were naturally saying things like, okay, if the inequality's got a line under, then it means it can be 3. And if it's not, then it means it can't be 3. And they made all these connections themselves without me having to explicitly say, okay, if it's got a line under, it means it can be equal to. Just by studying the diagram, you can figure that out. And if any of you are teaching secondary here, you'll notice that kids always get confused with whether they colour the dots in or not. And just by studying the diagram, they can make those connections. And by, I think, making the connections themselves, rather than you just telling them what the answer is, I think that's certainly a lot more powerful for me. So completion tables, they're great. Even really basic ones like just a straightforward 4 operations, something like that. Hide the values. So this is your A and B. So A plus B must be 13. A minus B must be 11. Something as basic as that can be made really quite complex depending on which ones you give. So if you want to practice your number ones now, okay, give them B and give them the total. Can they work backwards and work out what A is? Or give them the difference between the numbers and give them one of the numbers. Or give them what the total and the difference is. And that's when the fun starts, when you start giving them things like that. You can add in extra operations as well if you want. I mean, if the difference is 11 and they times together to give 12, I can't think of that off the top of my head. I'm sure I could with a bit of thinking, but it's 12 and 1. Yeah, 12 and 1 have a difference of 11. Times them together, you get 12. So you can see it's all about which cells you reveal to make some really quite interesting questions, and that's the idea behind these completion tables. So there's a load of them on MathsBot. There's quite a few, and I'm adding to them all the time because that's like my one of my obsessions, I guess. One other section, I've got a chance to show you one other section before I kind of do my finishing bit. There's and this one is low threshold, high ceiling. That's exactly the point on these, yeah. There's one for 2 colour counters as well there, by the way. You can even put the model on if you want the model on and of how we do that. So those directed number questions I said. So I quite like the how do we say it, the equivalent addition, and then what do we say in the answer as well. And again, you can randomize it, you can show them all, hide them all, change your number of rows, whatever you want. Any columns that you don't want, just get rid of. So if you don't want to do the we says anymore, you don't want the model, just that on itself is quite a nice task. Can you write every subtraction has an equivalent addition? Just something like that's quite nice, and then work them out. So just something like that. Rewrite that calculation and addition, and then can you answer it as well? So you can streamline these if you don't want all the extra bump. Just toggle them off at the top, because not everybody wants the we say, I say it every time as well. Yeah, that is nice, but eventually at some point, just looking at the chats there, I love the we say. I love to get the language absolutely spot on, but at some point you might say, okay, we've got this language nailed, so let's just get rid of them and let's just practice that. Can you just answer all those for me by writing them as additions? So yeah, you'll find that's the case on a lot of these. You can toggle off the ones that you no longer want. So like dividing by whatever, just get rid of the ones that you don't want to divide by. So there's just a simple division resource as well. So it's loads of practice. Imagine just giving a kid that. You've got like, I don't know, you got 8 times 4, 32 division questions there. If you want more, just toggle on a few more of those. It's slop, I call. Shed loads of practice in a simple space, but you can make it clever as well. I mean, just imagine on HF, if you got rid of the 54, Okay, but the number when it divided by 10 is 5.4. Can you work backwards? Oh yeah, it's 54, sir. That's not bad. Yeah, but what if you told them when you divide it by 12, it's 4.5? Can you work backwards as well? And then you could just do this entire resource and just do a nice little diagonal, say, something like that. Then all of a sudden, it's a much more richer resource. Rather than just giving them what you're dividing by, you can give them what the quotient is, and can they work backwards? So that's the idea behind these. And I'm still talking about them, and I really should probably stop because I want to get through some other stuff as well. But yeah, there's the completion tables. I just realized my PowerPoint I barely even used as well. So there's the manipulatives, the completion tables. This is why I like them. They're powerful and versatile, highly customizable, and they're great for differentiation and making connections. Someone's already mentioned low threshold, high ceiling in the chat as well. One other resource, one other section of the site I'll show you then is these variation grids here. Again, it's one of those which are not used very often at all. So I'm just going to show you a couple of examples and how I think you might find them useful. So there's a collection of them, not that many so far. How many is that? Like 12, 13, 14, 15 of them or something like that. And I'll load up one which is suitable for primary and secondary. So I use this yesterday with my year 8s, a Gatenio chart, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen, or a place values chart. So if I put the results on, it looks like that. Toggle them on and off. When it loads, it just looks like that with a 5 in the middle. And I try and harness the pupils' kind of natural curiosity, and I'll just give them one other square like that. I'll say, oh, do you reckon you can tell me what comes next? And they'll say things like, oh, I reckon it's going 7, 8, 9, or it's going 4, 3, 2. Oops, little spoiler there. Then I'll say, okay, what's happening as we go up the chart? Do you think? What do you think? And some kids will naturally say, oh, I reckon it goes 5, 6, 7 as well. But then when I show them one that it's 50, then you've got that idea of, okay, we're multiplying by 10 as we go up the chart. And then by the time I've shown them a few of them, we can build the entire Gatenio's chart, and it looks like that, which is great for practicing multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. One of my favorite activities is to just give them kind of just hide all those for a second, give them that square and say, can you get from that square to that square in 2 steps, just using multiplication or division, and then an addition or a subtraction. So some kids will say, well, I'm going to add on 500 first, which will take me to 800. And then I'll take my 800 and divide it by 10, 100, and 1,000. So 300, add 500, divide by 1,000. And that's one route through it like that. But someone else might want to take the route which looks at, say, this square down here. So how do I get from 300 to this one here? Well, if I take 300 and divide it by 1,000, well, that's going to give me 0.3. And then I can add on 0.5. So there's always 2 routes to these. You can add your 500, then divide by 1,000, or divide by 1,000 and add on your 0.5. So you can explore place value in quite a nice way with these Gatenio charts. But I've not explained what a structured variation grid is. That's just at the moment, that's just a Gatenio chart. And to be honest, there is another version of a Gatenio chart on MathsBot already. If you just type in Gatenio, there's one under tools and one under grids. So the normal tools one just looks like that with the place values aligned. You can randomize and stuff like that. The power in the structured variation grid for me is these little arrows here, which allows you to kind of like go up and down the values and go to the right as well and to the left. So they're infinitely extensible in each direction. And if you want to zoom up quite fast, if you shift click, instead of just going up by 1, if you shift click, so I'm holding shift button down, you can go up in tens as well, so you can quickly get to some larger numbers as well. So I always like to say how the computer breaks as well once you get to really big numbers, and that's not too far off how we might use standard form notation, because I was using Gatenio for standard form. So we got all the results, then I just revealed one other cell. I said, what do you think goes in there? And then I showed what it is, and I explained that means 7 multiplied by 10 twice, or times 10 times by 10. Are these manipulatives as easy navigated on an iPad? Yes, they should work fine on an iPad. The bigger the screen, the easier it works. But yes, it should work fine. So it's a nice little resource. And then you say, okay, if I just give them one cell I just gave them that one cell, and from that one cell, they were then able to tell me what this one's going to be. Well, sir, I reckon that one's going to be 9, but then I've times it by 10 1, 2, 3 times. So I reckon it's going to be 9 times 10 to the power 3. So that was my way into introducing something called standard form, which is quite a big topic when you get to secondary. But it's all based and it's all grounded in the idea of the Gatenio chart, which primary teachers use all the time. So that's a structured variation grid, and there's loads of them. So well, I say loads of them, there's 16. There's another one for arithmetic, which is quite a nice one. You can explore negative numbers. So just look at the positive quadrants up here. So these are all positive, and you can show some answers. So 6, 5, 4, 3. What's going to go here? Now we start having to use negatives. So -1 plus 3. And then you can start looking at all the negative numbers. So we've put all the calculations on, the results as well. You can put the colors on to show whether the answer is positive or negative. And again, it's infinitely extensible in each of the directions as well. You can even change the operation as well. So that's addition. If you do it with subtraction, obviously it kind of inverts. And you can look at multiplication as well. That idea that when you multiply two negatives together, the result is positive because it follows the laws of a sort of positive negative quadrants. So it just adds a bit of weight to that. You can change the number of rows as well if you want to make it bigger as well, and you can change where you start at, and it's all highly customizable just by having a click round. Well, so a lot of the stuff that I've shown you, all the tasks, like I'm basically using MathsBot to build. Well, I've given myself this ambitious target of 1,001 tasks. So you can see they're all down here. So if you log in with the member code, there's literally like, well, for example, that task there, I made a version like that on the Geo board, not too sort of far long ago. So there's and they're all editable. So you can just click on the PowerPoint. It will load up the PowerPoint, and none of the slides have got any branding on or anything like that. They're literally just like kind of naked PowerPoint slides. And you can just take that slide, drop it into your PowerPoint. So hopefully that might be useful for some of you. I've also started work on trying to tie all this together with a curriculum. So if I type in ratio and sharing in a ratio, and I say I'm dividing a quantity in a ratio, what I've started to do is try and put an objective with all the useful resources from MathsBot into that objective. So if you're dividing a quantity into ratio, you might want a bar modeling tool, you might want Q's and air rods. There's an example question there. So Anne and Bob were sharing sweets in the ratio 2 to 5. And if you load up any of these, say if I load up the Q's and air rods to model it, then it'll take that question there, hopefully. So that question there will get loaded up in the Q's and air rods. So I'm sharing sweets in the ratio 2 to 5. So I've shown you something like this, I think, before. So 2 to 5. And then Bob got 9 more sweets than Anne. Well, at the moment, the difference is 3 between them. But if I scale it up 3 times, the difference between them would be 9. So how many sweets shared in total? Well, it's going to be 15 plus 6. And you can show no solution there because the solution's in the objectives. And those tables as well that I showed you, if you don't want to mess around with the completion tables, they're already there, good to go as well. Now so there's that 210 task I showed you, or there's another one here. You might want to keep Anne taking £12 all the same.
So Johnathan, thank you so much. Real pleasure. Your enthusiasm and your expertise is contagious and infectious in a good way. Thank you all so much for giving up your time, and we'll let you go. As I said, this has been recorded. We'll put it up on and share it. Please do let your colleagues know that it's there, and spread the word about MathsBot and how we could be using it. So thank you all so much for coming.